Hello, friends in Pakistan and elsewhere. Today, in this conversation, we are going to focus on China. Unfortunately, China has been in focus, particularly of the West, for multiple reasons, at times for tariffs, at times for human rights violations, and at times for what the Western sources call one party dictatorship. However, the situation on ground probably is much more different than it is portrayed in the Western media. It's simply about two different systems. And that's why we thought we should talk to somebody who is familiar with the situation, offers a different perspective. And it is Dr. Mohammad Ali Ehsan. And he teaches at a number of universities in Karachi, in south of Pakistan. He has also been teaching at the National Defense University in Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan, and thinks differently, looks at China with a different prism, which we can say the Pakistani prism or the Pakistani perspective. So thank you very much, Ehsan Saab, for sparing your time. I would like to ask, what difference has the Chinese Communist Party made to this Western large province of Xinjiang?
Thank you very much, sir, for having me on the program. It's really a great privilege and a pleasure to join you on this very important matter, I think, which needs a lot of debate and a lot of discussion. Xinjiang province and how Chinese Communist Party has made difference in that. I think, sir, the most fundamental thing, to understand the significance of any problem, one needs to, I think, first recognize go into the origin and the history of that. We correctly understand that we can really understand the issue. Fundamentally, sir, I think that China and Chinese Communist Party doesn't look at Xinjiang province, which to me is a province like in Pakistan, we have the Balochistan province. So it is the Balochistan of China. And in that way, China looks at it from the point of view of geopolitical insecurity and not from the point of view of human rights, which is how the West wants the world to look at it. So China, when you talk about Xinjiang, it is surrounded by about 8 countries, and all of them are like if you name them, have a major Muslim population. So if there is a separatist movement going on, and if there are Uyghurs that are Muslims, they are, so there is this fear that China has that kind of extremism or something with Al Qaeda and ISIS present in certain countries, that their extremism or their kind of Islam shouldn't spill over and come into China. When we talk about the China Communist Party, particularly, sir, I think I always say that there are the 3 P's. The first is the population, the second is the propaganda, and the third is the People's Republic Army. These are the 3 things about which the Chinese Communist Party is very conscious. And it's when you talk about the Chinese people, the kind of economic upgradation and the way that China has managed itself, in the way that it has improved the lives of its people, especially in the time of the Prime Minister Deng Xiaoping, and later on also after President Xi has taken over. That is something, a standard of life is there that China doesn't want that it should lose it. And if we say that Xinjiang is a province which needs special attention, which needs Chinese Communist Party's real attention to really bring it into the mainstream of Chinese population. That is one challenge that they have. And all this propaganda, I had this opportunity, the great opportunity, to listen to the Consul General of China in the consulate in Karachi on the 73rd Republic Day. And he spoke about a lot of things, but one thing particularly that he spoke about was how Xinjiang province is seen differently by the West. And he gave 3-4 very pertinent facts that I noted down, and I also wrote about them in my article. The first thing that he said was that the population of Xinjiang in 1962 was closer to 2 million, and it has risen to about 12 million now. The second thing was that the number of mosques in Xinjiang province have risen to about 24,000 mosques. And that number of mosques are almost the double amount of double number of mosques that are there combined together, USA, Japan, and Germany. And even he further stated that almost to every 530 group of people, one mosque is available. And the third thing that he said was about how there's a lot of machines that have gone there, and a lot of work is being carried out through machines and not through bare hands. I think he was trying to highlight a fact that West keeps telling, and there have been laws passed there that there is forced labor there, and we should not import things from China. So he was particularly telling us that no such thing is taking place. So sir, these are a few things that tell me that how China is being treated. China is treating Xinjiang province differently.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, this is a very good example of how China has helped the Xinjiang region develop. It has been a remarkable achievement, an unusual pace of development, the way I have also seen. And I think there are very few examples in the world where the central government has put in so much effort, so much investment just to facilitate the lives of the local people. It can come, with certain restrictions, with limitations, but the fact that you mentioned in the beginning that most of Xinjiang is surrounded mostly by Muslim-dominated regions, and most of the Muslim-dominated regions and countries have been facing the Islamist insurgencies. So I think this is a very legitimate reason. But despite that, I think China did not make it into a reason to deny the local people the fruits of development. Now, if we look at the level of development, why does the West then take an issue with Xinjiang in particular, using the human rights as a political weapon?
So again, I would like to, this is my point of view, and maybe not very popular, especially with the West. But when you look at the time when USA, it was developing, we're talking about the 19th and 20th century. So I draw a lot of similarity in what is happening with China now, in what was happening with them there. They were clearly divided into East and West, and they had this eastern coast with them, and it took them time to really move towards the West. And we have heard about the great gold rush in California, and how the people, the very population of California changed from somewhere being 50,000 to 400,000 people. And there was this connectivity that they managed through a railway system, in how the distance could now be traveled in one day, the distance that was being traveled in weeks. And whatever happened there was this purchase of Louisiana also, which now constitutes about 15 US states that they purchased from France. So why I'm referring to all this is because in a similar way, China has got its opening into the Pacific on the east side, but it's almost landlocked on the western side, where the Xinjiang province, very important province, is. And the way that USA looked at that time, and at that time it was all about geopolitical securities that you would look at, and not through human rights, because we were hardly talking about human rights at that time. So now China and Russia also, so they are great land powers, but they have their own those geopolitical insecurities that the US is not willing to understand. Why? Because it's got Atlantic on one side, the Pacific on one side. It's pretty much a secure country. Such securities are not enjoyed by these two countries. Xinjiang specifically gives a great buffer to China, and that buffer is from the heartland. And the heartland is, as you would know, is something that has been invaded time and again. The Germans have gone there twice. The Napoleon has gone there. The Mongols have risen and invaded China itself and ruled it. China has had its century of humiliation because it has been a land power which has been surrounded by many enemies. So, sir, this concern, I think, that the Chinese have about Xinjiang province needs to be understood in that geopolitical reality, that we must understand it, and not from the point of view just looking at from the prism of human rights debate, which is actually the Chinese thing is a propaganda. And I also think, you cannot emphasize and tell a country, especially, sir, if we talk about the social contract, it basically is a constitute. It means how the state, you surrender your rights to the state, and in return, the state would give you certain securities. China and the China Communist Party is actually exactly doing the same. What it is trying to do is have the population of Xinjiang is now touched 25 million. more than half of them are Muslims. You talk about the entire population of China, where the Muslims population stand out as 22 million. More than half of that is in Xinjiang. So China basically is an atheist country. 67% of the Chinese people are do not believe in God.
Yeah, I know.
Buddhist.
Actually, not many Western countries talk about the human rights as they are practiced in most of the Middle Eastern countries, which are the best allies of the United States and other NATO countries like Qatar, Dubai, UAE, Saudi Arabia. The way people, workers from Asian and African countries are treated there, there's quite a bit of discrimination, and the way most of the labor lives there. However, now, would you say that it's basically because of the geopolitics, or is it a lack of understanding of how China works that we every now and then come across these critical statements, videos shot secretly, or articles and fake news? Recently, there was news also about President Xi Jinping having been put under house arrest ahead of the the Communist Party Congress later this month.
Yeah, sir, I think the way the China works is quite unique in terms of how it has got a political system that is quite different from the one. I would like to link it up with the concept of the end of history that Francis Fukuyama gave. We're talking about 1980s, and he's saying that the human beings have come to the end of that evolution process, and we have reached that stage where the final form of government is now there in the form of democracy. So if you talk about those two twin principles of democracy, that is basically liberty, and with that equality, I think the political system being very, very authoritative and illiberal, but still, sir, I think that these two twin principles, that democracy has failed to usher, to give to people in the non-Western countries, are pretty much being given by the Chinese Communist Party back to their people. When we talk about liberty and when we talk about equality, we know that there are a lot of people, about 600, 700 million of them, that have come above the poverty line that was in 80s and 90s after Deng Xiaoping's economic liberalization. And when we talk about, sir, the people not being happy with the political system that is there, there's an example that is generally quoted, and that is that in the 2020, before the pandemic, 2019 maybe, the number of Chinese that went abroad on vacations were about 130 million people. And the number of Chinese that came back after their vacations were again the same number of people that went out. So if the people were unhappy in how the things were going on in China, I think they would have never returned. I also think, sir, that China, unlike Russia, thinks that it has to, remain part of the international liberal system that is going on, because it is in a contract with its people, 1.4 billion people whose lives it has to continue to give them a better standard of living, and for that purpose, it cannot afford to, outrightly challenge the West. But in certain areas, like it is said that it will not replace USA, but it will displace it. Because
here you bring me to the last question, and basically it was a very appropriate, timely transition from one subject to the other, and that brings me to the question: what is the difference of approaches between China, the United States, and its allies? How they treat the world, how they engage with the rest of the world? Can you differentiate the approaches?
Yes, sir. So China, the last time that it fought the war was against Vietnam in 1979. And USA itself, it had a very good, beautiful unipolar moment. And we know, sir, the way that certain premises made by the US presidents have gone absolutely wrong. In last 28 years, if you talk about the 4 presidents, I can quote to you the premises that they made, basing on which you make your assumptions and make your policies. All 4 of those premises are very famous. When Bill Clinton came in, he was a non-war president, and he entrenched himself and he had this moment where he could have really ventured out and brought in some just resolutions to the crises that were there. Rwanda and other places have had genocides, and USA was holding itself back. That was Bill Clinton's premise that no, we will not move out and stay where we were. And then we had President Bush, and his premise was to create war on terror, the very famous phrase that we now keep hearing. Not only that he created that war on terror, he made sure that the entire world joined him in understanding and believing in his slogan of either you are with us or against us. And the kind of, there's the joke made that how does a fly destroy a China shop? And it is said that the fly goes into the nostril of the bull, and then the bull goes into the China shop and then destroys the complete China shop. You know what happened in 9/11? The Twin Towers were hit, but that didn't mean that the response of USA should have been such unproportionate that it destroyed entirely Afghanistan and Iraq and other countries in the way that it responded. Then we had President Obama. And President Obama's premise was, he was all for reaching out to the Muslims. And he thought that maybe in Middle East, it was not that the people were, fed up with the monarchies. It was more, he thought that they wanted democracy. Again, a wrong presumption. And again, it had its consequences. And lastly, we are all very familiar with Donald Trump and his America First policy, where he just backtracked from all the agreements and all the alliances and so USA has done some blunders, and China has been working on the principle of Deng Xiaoping, who very clearly stated that it is not a black cat or a white cat. As long as a cat catches a mouse, it is a good cat, and biding time and staying on. And China has had a beautiful foreign policy, one point agenda, and which is non-interference. We don't find China interfering into the internal matters of any country, sir. And that is how I think both of them are different.
That's a fantastic conclusion to this conversation. And that is premised also in the Chinese principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries. And secondly, China is more focused on geoeconomics rather than geopolitics, which has been the hallmark of the NATO countries, whereas China, I think, it continues to engage economically, is investing money in Asian and African countries. And that is why I think the world needs to understand China in a better way rather than through a geopolitical or political prism that, of course, then muddies the view of those who are looking at China from across the Atlantic or the Pacific. So thank you very much, Dr. Mohammad Ali Ehsan. It has been fantastic talking to you. We'll be in touch for more similar conversations.